Welcome to Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, my co-host, Stephen Young of Roto Grinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the NOCO 400 at Martinsville here on Running Hot. Last week, Christopher Bell took his first win of the year at the Bristol Dirt Race. That also moves him into the top spot in the point standings. Tyler Reddick was your runner-up, and Austin Dillon grabbed the much-needed third-place finish, really proving himself to be a very good dirt racer. Stevie, the dirt race kind of played out, I think, like we think. The dirt guys, they really showed up, didn't they?
They did. For the most part, I had a great week, really good week in daily fantasy. Good week in betting. Had Todd Gillen top 10 at like 6-1. So that was nice. I really thought we were going to have like a massive week with Blaney, and then Briscoe decided that he didn't want to try to make the corner on that restart. So, it was a good week. The one thing that I definitely got wrong was Austin Dillon. I know he had a lot of speed in the heat race. I didn't think he would. He proved me wrong. We'll just call it that. So if we do go back to the dirt next year, which I hope we don't, maybe he's someone we can look at next year. But overall, I thought it was entertaining. It's just not my favorite. I come from a dirt background. Like, I've grown up at the dirt track, and it's not dirt racing. Anybody that like enjoyed it as a dirt race just hasn't been to your local dirt track. So was it entertaining? Yes. Was it predictive? Actually, this year it was pretty predictive. Which, we should like that, right? Like, we made a lot of money. Should like that. But as a NASCAR fan, I'm not a huge fan of them running dirt, especially when I love the concrete track at Bristol so much.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I want Bristol concrete back. And, you had a very good week. My podcast bets were good, but the rest of my bets got obliterated thanks to that Blaney incident, which then Alex Bowman had an incident late. I lost a whole bunch of head-to-head matchups versus Brad Keselowski thanks to all of that. So not my best week, but we can't win them all. But at least the podcast bets were the good ones that I had last week. So we are moving on from Bristol Dirt to another short track, but this time it is the half-mile paperclip at Martinsville. So, Stevie, I know you and I, we both love Martinsville. How are you handicapping races at Martinsville? Are you using other shorter flat tracks? Are you mostly just looking at Martinsville history? What do you got for us here at Martinsville?
75% looking at recent Martinsville, because it's just such a unique racetrack, right? Like, at the end of the day, it's kind of its own animal. Yeah, we have other short flat tracks, but it's really, if anything, maybe look at the Clash. And it's still not even like the most comparable thing. So, this new package that we've run on the short flat tracks this year, I think it matters. Who's been fast, who's been slow, who's missed right off the truck, I think is somewhat important. And the good thing is, like, with Richmond kind of getting rained out for practice and qualifying, like, we know who was fast off the truck for that race and like who made the improvements from Phoenix. So I think, like, going in, like, all right, well, this team made this improvement from Phoenix, and hopefully they can make that improvement from Martinsville. And what kind of stinks is, like, Martinsville won last year was atrocious. You couldn't pass. It was cold. It was a unique race in itself on a unique racetrack. So I think looking at Martinsville 2 from last year is going to be our best comp. And then it's like, hey, it's a one race sample size. So it's kind of tough to handicap going in this week. But I think the books are also struggling with handicapping this week, because outside of some outrights, there's some value this week on some certain bets.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's, and we'll talk about it. My 4 bets, none of those are outrights. I've got a bunch of different prop bets, but I agree with you. I think the books are struggling a little bit outside of the outright market. You mentioned that really cold race last year, but then that second race, you definitely could pass. And now we have the low downforce package, like you mentioned, you alluded to there. We saw the low downforce package at Phoenix. We saw it at Richmond. I know Denny Hamlin on his Actions Detrimental podcast said he thinks fast cars will be able to pass here at Martinsville for sure, which would be a massive difference compared to last year's, spring Martinsville race. So what do you make just of the low downforce package in general, what we've seen so far this year and how it applies to Martinsville?
Yeah, I mean, fast cars have been fast. And at the end of the day, that's what we want, right? Like, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to predict those fast cars. So looking at like data, we can have a good idea who should be fast. And if we can pass, I mean, even if we can use the bumper, right? Like Martinsville is unique. A lot of the passing at Martinsville is using the bumper, moving the car out in front of you out of the groove, not wrecking them, just moving them. So if you're fast enough to be able to run to someone's bumper and they don't want to lay over, I mean, use the bumper. And I mean, that's just how Martinsville is. But if we have this downforce package where like that second groove becomes, playable, then I mean, there's just no reason why fast cars are not going to be moving to the front. So it's a long race. There's 500 laps. It's one of the most difficult races of the year. And I mean, it's phenomenal. But one thing that I will note, just kind of thinking about like, will the low downforce package help? I mean, there's been some people that have really struggled and they've struggled at Martinsville. So you can kind of cross off a few guys coming right into the weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And, you mentioned coming into the weekend, there was potential rain in the forecast, but now it's looking a little less iffy. It looks a little better. There is certainly some rain in the forecast for Sunday. Could we see the damp weather package at all this weekend? And if so, how would that affect things?
I mean, I hope we don't see it. If we do see it, then I mean, it's just going to open up long shots for me. Like that's all it does. Like, and I'm not saying like, hey, I'm going to go out of my way and bet Corey LaJoy to win the race, but I'm definitely, if we do have rain in the forecast and that's like a conversation, then I'm looking more at like maybe like a Tyler Reddick who's like 25-1, or Kevin Harvick who's like 22-1 type of guys. Daniel Suarez 40-1, like cars that I know have speed, and just hey, like the unpredictability of what these damp tires are going to do. But I still think like even in a damp tire situation, I still think like Martinsville's so unique that like you still have to be good at Martinsville even on a damp tire.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. So that is our Martinsville preview. It's time to get into the bets. As always, we're going to take you for a lap around Martinsville. 4 turns, 1 pick from each of us per turn before we drive in the victory lane. So we've taken the green flag and it's time to dive into turn 1.
The guys that I think I'm probably going to be the highest on coming into the weekend is Ryan Preece. His top 10 right now is plus 250. Huge fan that what we've seen so far. He was extremely fast at the Clash before having an issue. He probably would have won that race, which would have like set his season up so much more than where it's at. He's been fast at Phoenix and Richmond, top 10 speed. And if we look back to Martinsville too, Cole Custer was a top 10 car. He was like 6th in speed in that race. Well, this is the same equipment, and Preece is better than Custer at this racetrack type. So not only do I like Preece for a top 10, I've been debating, I'm leaning towards throwing a little, maybe like quarter unit or 0.2 unit type of, at 50-1 for Preece to even win this race. Cause I think like that is the ceiling that he has this weekend.
I totally agree with you there. I'm very high on Ryan Preece, and that's why he is also my turn 1 pick. I'm going to take him in the top Ford market. I think there's a lot of upside there at 12-1. I mean, just going along with everything you said, Stevie, but a little more context on Custer. Not only was he a top 10 car at the second Martinsville race, but in that first Martinsville race, he qualified 3rd, and he finished inside the top 5 in both stages before he had a pit penalty, and then just that ruined his day because he couldn't pass there in that first race. So in both Martinsville races, stage 1 and stage 2, Custer finished top 5 in all 4 of those stages. And as you mentioned, Preece is an even better short flat type short track driver than Cole Custer is. So I love Preece this weekend, and that's why I'm rolling with an upside pick here at top Ford 12-1. There's a little bit of like Joey Logano and Ryan Blaney are both very good here, but Penske has struggled a little bit with long run speed under this lower downforce package at the short track. So if we get a long run to end the race here at Martinsville, I think it's very possible Preece ends up as top Ford. What do you think?
No, I like this. I mean, like I was saying, I think he has like the ceiling to win this race. So
Mhm.
the fact that like the Ford camp is strong. Like,
Yep.
Kevin Harvick has been incredible, but Martinsville's not Kevin Harvick's best track. So you kind of factor that in. And then you factor in like just how unlucky Ryan Blaney is on pit road. I mean, he is, if you could just run 500 laps on the racetrack and not have to pit, I would take Blaney more to win more than most drivers. So the fact that he's just so unlucky on pit road, and then Joey Logano, they either hit it or they miss. And so like getting it at 12-1 and really just kind of factoring that he needs to beat Keselowski, Logano, Blaney, and Harvick. I mean, that's kind of where it's baked in. So I like this at 12-1.
Yeah, definitely. So that is turn one. Now we got to roll through the corner. Make sure we keep it on the bottom there. We don't want a car to get underneath us as we go into turn two.
I mean, I'm going to go to the Toyota camp. I'm going to talk about the only outright that I've talked or taken this week so far, and that's Denny Hamlin at 7-1. And the reason that I'm taking this at 7-1 is because I do expect him to be fast off the truck, and this is a racetrack that he's very good at. And I think this might end up like 5-1 type of line by the end of the weekend. So I'm going to jump on this early. If I'm wrong and it pushes to like 10 or 11, I'm going to take it again. That's how much I like Hamlin this week. So him and Bell had by far the best two cars at the fall Martinsville race. Hamlin fell off a little late, but I think he was more points racing once he was running like third or fourth in that race. And then Chastain did the Hail Melon and like ended up beating Hamlin to get into the championship for. But I think like just kind of looking at it as a whole, he had the best driver rating. He led 203 laps in that race. There aren't many drivers that are better than Denny Hamlin at the paperclip in general. He has 5 career wins, 17 top 5 finishes in 34 races here at Martinsville. And if it does become like a damp racetrack type of situation, give me the guy that has the experience at Martinsville, running multiple grooves. So I like the Toyota camp a lot this week. I think Bell and Hamlin are going to unload fast. I hope that like Chase Elliott being back kind of floods the market a little bit and like we see lines move a little bit to our favor, because I don't think Chase is going to be competitive, and that's for another day. But give me Denny here at 7-1.
Staying on that Chase Elliott fade train. This
I
time for a
just
little different reason there, of course.
I know, man, out of the car this long, and like that injury is like a serious injury. Like this
Yeah.
is like a really demanding racetrack. Like, why wouldn't you pick Talladega as like your return instead of like Martinsville? But I guess like you want to get back into the points, but without the top 30 thing, and you're going to get a waiver, you're Chase Elliott. So I think I would have picked Talladega, and I really wanted to see Josh Berry in the 9. So anyway, sorry.
Oh, you're good. So going back to Denny Hamlin here, he has led over 100 laps in 3 of the last 4 Martinsville races. So totaling 580 laps led in those 4 races. He's had a little bit of bad luck. He had that incident with Alex Bowman. Obviously had the pit problem last year, which meant he had to come back through the field and finish 6th. So Denny Hamlin, very good bet here at 7-1. For my turn 2 pick, I'm going to go to a head-to-head matchup. I'm going to take Eric Almirola minus 115 over Chris Buescher at BetMGM. Almirola is 4-2 versus Buescher head-to-head while they've both been with their current teams. Almirola with Stewart-Haas Racing, Chris Buescher with RFK Racing. So that record actually improves to 8-4 if we go back further to Buescher's JTG Doherty years. And one of those years, Eric Almirola was actually in the Petty ride as well. And Almirola's 4 losses, 1 loss was in that Petty ride. 1 was a DNF after running 99.7% of the laps he ran inside the top 15, where Buescher was only 90% in that metric in that race. And then a DNF after leading the race for 19 laps. And then he did have 1 poor race. So really, he could have, instead of being 8-4, he could be like 11-1 versus Chris Buescher head-to-head. And again, just looking at their current teams, Buescher only has 1 top 10 at Martinsville in 6 races, which is, about 17% top 10 rate. Almirola, 4 out of 10 with Stewart-Haas Racing, a 40% rate. So I'm going to take Almirola over Buescher. What are your thoughts here?
I like this. I'm with you on this one. Like, if we look at just like the 2 short flat track races too, Almirola was cruising through the field in the first one, and then the tire fell off. And then the second race, he had a ton of speed on his way to like a 13th place finish. Where Buscher, I mean, he's had a couple decent finishes on these racetracks, but it was more of like strategy too, with the tire and stuff. So I do like Amarola over Buscher. I think long term, like this is value.
Yeah, for sure. So that is turn 2. Now we're going down that short, a little backstretch into turn 3.
I'm gonna go back to my boy Ryan Preece. Listen, I'm very high on Ryan Preece this week, but I'm gonna take him over Austin Dillon at 105 here, minus 105 on BetMGM. So I like this a lot. Like Preece has an average finish of 16.7, or average running position at Phoenix and Richmond of 16.7, where Austin Dillon was 24.4 in those two races. Dillon struggled with overall speed at Martinsville in general last year. And like I mentioned earlier, this is a great racetrack type for Preece. Custer had a ton of speed. So looking at like this year as a whole on the short flat tracks, Preece should be 130 here. So I see value at minus 105. I saw this on another book as well outside of MGM, and it was 115. So I think this is going to move. So I want to get this at 105, minus 105 here early on MGM.
Yeah, definitely like that. I mean, we're high on the Ryan Preece train, so I'm right there with you. For my turn 3 pick, I'm going to go to this Penske teammate matchup. I'm going to take Ryan Blaney plus 105 over Joey Logano. And this is nice because we have just true apples to apples comparison here in the exact same equipment. Blaney, 6 wins versus 4 losses head to head against Joey Logano here at Martinsville in their 10 races together at Penske. In those 10 races, Blaney's median finish is 4, and Joey Logano's median finish, so again, the finish that he finishes better than 50% of the time or worse than 50% of the time, is 6. So Blaney 4, Joey 6. We look at average finish, which, weighs the bad ones even more. Average finish, Blaney 6.5, 6.5, Joey Logano 6.6. So Blaney leads in every metric. He leads just barely in average driver rating as well, and some of these other predictive stats. Fastest laps, for example, Blaney leads Joey Logano here. So I think this should be more like minus 105 instead of plus 105. I think Blaney should be a slight favorite here, so I'm happy to get plus money on Ryan Blaney versus teammate Joey Logano.
What's crazy to me, like looking at this bet, is the books could do really well here, just making both of these guys minus 110. So getting this at plus money is value to me, because I really do think at the end of the day, it's a coin flip. If Blaney stays clean on pit road, he probably beats Logano. If Logano unloads fast, I think it's competitive. I think this type of racetrack, I would give Blaney the edge right now. So getting this at plus money is nice.
Yeah, I mean, little thin value, but hey, value is value for sure. So that is turn 3. It is time to go into turn 4.
All I'm realizing here is I should look into a Ford manufacturer bet, because I mean, like, the more we get going here, the more like I like Fords this week. And I mean, that's turn 4. We're looking at the checkered flag, and we're hoping our boy Brad Keselowski finishes inside the top 10. He's plus 105. This is a track Keselowski and Roush Fenway found something on last year. They were testing stuff throughout the playoffs, and they found something. They did end up, getting disqualified for not meeting minimum weight. Like, I don't even know how that's possible anymore with all the systems, but hey, like there was no even like appeal or anything. It was just, he finished 4th. He got DQ'd. They moved on. He's had a ton of speed at the 2 short flat tracks to start the season. So whatever they found last year on this type of racetrack, it's definitely converted over to how fast they've been this season. So he also made the final round of qualifying here last season. If he's able to do this again, this line's going to move. If he starts inside the top 10, we're probably looking at anywhere from minus 120 to minus 150 here for a top 10 for Keselowski. So this is another one that I want to jump on while we're getting some plus odds, and hopefully he does qualify inside the top 10 and we look like we're smart.
Yeah, absolutely. In talking about qualifying there, you mentioned he qualified in the top 10 both races last year. Going back to Ryan Preece, well, Cole Custer qualified in the top 5 in both Martinsville races last year. So definitely want to jump on Preece and jump on Keselowski early. And that's why my turn 4 pick is also Brad Keselowski. I'm going to take him for that top Ford market at 7-1. I just think that's too long of a number. It probably should be more like 5-1. Brad had top 10 speed at both short flat races this year at Phoenix and at Richmond. Only one top 10 finish from those, but definitely a top 10 speed in both of those. Last year, he did have a top 12 car at the first Martinsville race prior to a pit penalty that he had as well. There were several drivers that got bit by pit penalties, Bubba Wallace, Brad Keselowski, Cole Custer. And then again, you just couldn't pass through the field after that happened. You mentioned that second Martinsville race, he finished 4th. Obviously before that weird disqualification. And, I mentioned the Blaney Logano potential little bit of struggle on this lower downforce package long run here. So it's not that I dislike Logano and Blaney here. It's just if we get a long run here, could that come to bite them with their struggle in the long run speed this year in the shorter flat tracks with this package? So those are our 4 picks, turns 1 through 4. That means, Stevie, it is time to drive into victory lane. We took the checkered flag. We won the race. So who are we taking as our victory lane pick?
I mean, we're waving it, right? We're in victory lane in Martinsville, and maybe we're having a hot dog or two. Kyle Larson is our guy this week. Top 5 plus 150. I found value on this one. I like this. I think that Kyle Larson is someone that is very consistent, and he's fast pretty much everywhere. He's just one of the best race car drivers that we have in the sport right now. He was 3rd in speed in the fall Martinsville race on his way to a 2nd place finish. He had the best average finish and ranks 1st in speed at Richmond and Phoenix through those new downforce. And like when you just think of cars sliding and like needing to find grip, you just feel like I think Kyle Larson, his average running position in those 2 races was 2.7. Martinsville fall, he had a 3.5 average running position, which was the 2nd best. So everything just kind of points me to taking this number. You're getting him at 7-1 on most books. I know you and I were, when we were talking about this, you found him at 10-1, which is insane value.
Yeah.
So we like the top 5 here at plus 150 for Kyle Larson.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Kyle Larson and William Byron, both of them right now are the guys to beat, maybe overall in the series, but definitely even at these shorter flat tracks, Richmond, Phoenix, and probably Martinsville this weekend as well. And I know historically Martinsville hasn't been a great track for Kyle Larson, but he's in that mold of drivers where you get better and better at Martinsville. And then once you're good at Martinsville, you're good at Martinsville. And he is there now. You mentioned that 3.5 average running position, 2nd best in last year's playoff Martinsville race. So I think we're going to see more of that from Kyle Larson. My model gives about 40% weight to recent form, just overall recent form. And obviously Larson's at the top of the list there. It gives about 30% weight to Martinsville track history itself. And it gives about 30% weight to overall flat tracks, shorter flat tracks. And Larson's just been slaying on all of those. So he is number 1 in my model this weekend in terms of win probability. So top 5 plus 150. Very nice. If you go back and look at like his finishing record, you're not going to see value based off of like the number of top 5s and the number of races. But that's because he's been one of those who's improved at Martinsville and now he's good here. So wanted to put that out there that, a lot of times we'll be like, oh, he finished this in the last number of races. We're not going to see that here with Larson, but that's okay because a little bit different situation here. So that is going to, go for it. Go for it.
No, really quick, just to touch on like his recent finishes, like last year, 1st race, speeding penalty. 2nd, the fall race, what was it? 2021 fall race, pit penalty, drove back to 5th and then got another pit penalty. So like the finishes don't necessarily show the speed that he's had at Martinsville either.
Yeah, exactly. So right there with you, the finishes are also not, finishes aren't as predictive as speed, running position, driver rating, fast laps, those kinds of things. So definitely right there with you. But that is going to do it for us. Thank you for listening to the Martinsville episode of Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. And we got a good one next week. We're going to be talking bets for the Geico 500 at Talladega. I love super speedway racing. I love drafting racing. When things can get wild and crazy, that's my bread and butter. So back to drafting. Oh yeah, On behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you back here next week on Running Hot from Action Network.